Can you hear me? Check 98765. Good morning. Good morning. Hey, so over here in the corner is Brother Muhammad. Muhammad is one of the mayor's assistants. And so I'm with Muhammad one day, and I told him I was, I had ridden, I was going for a little ride on my bike. And the most I've ever done on my bike in my life is 26 miles, and it almost killed me. So he said, well, let's go riding. Why don't you go with me on Saturday? So I said, where are you going? And he said, I'm riding my bike up to Pittsburgh.
And he was serious, too.
No thanks.
I'm surprised he wasn't riding to New York.
Man, oh man.
New York Giants fan.
Muhammad. Uh-huh. 2 minutes, all right.
Yeah, putting makeup on me is in the Keep Hope Alive category, right? Yes.
Are we going to get some water? Somebody going to get us some water? Okay, all right.
Good morning. Thank you, sir. Okay. Got a nice crowd here.
Got a lot of my family out here who was at the funeral yesterday.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't know this was the past.
Yeah, yeah. Eddie, she was Eddie's.
Hi, I'm Andy Shalal. I'm the owner of Busboys and Poets. We are so happy to have Rock Newman and the Rock Newman Show join our tribe here. We are a tribe. This is a place where racial and cultural connections are consciously uplifted, a place where art, culture, and politics intentionally collide. This is a space to take a deliberate pause and feed your mind, body, and soul. We believe by creating such a space, we can actually change our community, change D.C., and change the world for the better. And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Good morning, world. This is the Rock Newman Show. We are broadcasting indeed from Busboys and Poets, 14th and V Street, Northwest Washington, D.C. We are in the Langston Hughes room. I like to say that. We today have a special broadcast, and we are being carried by WHUT, that's Howard University Television. Those of you who know me know well that I think that Howard University is the single most important institution of higher learning in the world. So it is an absolute pleasure for the Rock Newman Show to be carried by WHUT. This is a very special program for us. This is a very special and interesting time in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and it is our pleasure to have for the entire hour His Honor, Washington, D.C. Mayor Vincent Gray. Welcome to the Rock Newman Show on WHUT. Thank you for joining us. Mayor Gray, let's jump right in. Washington, D.C. is referred to as the seat of democracy, the seat of the most powerful city and the most powerful nation on the planet. And Washington, D.C. citizens have, in essence, second-class citizenship. What must we do to get home rule? What must Washington, D.C. do to become a state?
First of all, Rock, thank you for having me on. I'm delighted to be here, and I want to congratulate you on what you've done with this show. It really has wide appeal across the city, and I'm delighted to be a part of it. I really think we need more activism. You know, I often quote Frederick Douglass in terms of what he said, and that is, power concedes nothing without a struggle. Yes. It never has, and it never will. Yeah. And I just am amazed at the level of complacency that exists in the District of Columbia about what I call the hypocrisy of democracy. And that is, you have this nation, which is admittedly, arguably the world's greatest democracy, goes to Iraq to fight for democracy for people there, Afghanistan. We were about to engage with Syria. We've been other places before. Yet our own federal government will not fight for democracy for the 632,000 people who live in the District of Columbia. And frankly, I think what it's going to take is more activism. We just went through what I thought was an idiotic shutdown of the federal government. I have yet to figure out what was achieved by that. We were called just before October 1st, which is when it started, and asked for our shutdown plan. I said, shutdown plan? Well, yeah, the District of Columbia has to have its budget approved by the Congress, and the Congress is not going to approve any appropriations at this time, so the District of Columbia needs a shutdown plan. So I went back and talked to our folks. I went back and I talked to the council of the District of Columbia. And I said, this is a watershed moment. Why should we shut down? This is our money. Yeah. We raised $6.1 billion from our property taxes, our income taxes, our sales taxes, which all these people in this place will pay today, to be here, to be a part of what's going on, to eat today. Why should we have to ask them to spend our own money? And so I made the decision ultimately to say, here's our shutdown plan, that every operation in the District of Columbia, every employee in the District of Columbia is essential, and we're not shutting down anything. So,
if I wasn't on TV, I'd say praise the Lord.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I said if I wasn't on TV, I'd say praise the Lord.
Oh,
hallelujah.
Okay. Seriously, we had to live off of our reserves. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I ran on when I came in office in 2011 was fiscal stability. And we've built a reserve fund of $1.5 billion in this city. We could not access our own money because it had not been approved. So we used our reserves to make sure our people kept working, they kept getting paid in a timely fashion. There were some bills that we had to delay, like our payment to Metro, which was tens of millions of dollars. But until the people of this city get absolutely sick and tired of it, like Fannie Lou Hamer, yes. Sick and tired of being sick and tired, yes. It really isn't going to change. And the irony of it all was, in the midst of all of this shutdown, people have said the Republicans are the obstacle, the Democrats are our friends. Well, the Republicans actually passed a piece of legislation that would have exempted the District of Columbia immediately from that shutdown, and the Democrats wouldn't pass it because they said there was a larger issue. And I kept trying, what is the larger issue? Yeah. There's nothing larger than the democracy of the people in this city in this situation.
Which brings me to my next question. Last week, sitting in that chair was City Council Chairperson Phil Mendelson. Mm-hmm. And I asked him whether or not he could cite examples of whether Barack Obama was better for the nation's capital than George Bush was. And as a seasoned veteran politician, Phil Mendelson struggled with that question, and at the end didn't come up with an answer. I ask you, has Barack Obama, since he's been in office, been any better in any way for Washington, D.C. than the previous administration?
Well, I can cite certain things that I think you can point to, but if you ask me if I think enough has been done, the answer is absolutely no. First of all, they put the license plates on. You know, they say taxation without representation. That is symbolism. That's nice, but that really is that's a start in an effort. They have included in budgets that have gone to the Congress a request for budget autonomy for the District of Columbia. But really, I have seen no advocacy to try to make that happen. So in terms of results, Rock, no, we have no more results today than we did before.
I find that to be a shame. My next point of concern and question I'd like you to respond to is when Obama came in office, you know, much fanfare, the election 2008, inauguration 2009, really wonderful, felt great, just fabulous that he went to Ben's Chili Bowl and had lunch and, you know, looked like we were on our way. There was the executive office, President of the United States is Democrat, majority Senate, and majority in Congress, all Democrat. Why was there no action? What do you think? How do you account for that?
Well, I just don't think that we were a priority. You know, there were people who, in the early days of the Obama administration, talked about the priorities that he had to focus on, like the recession, like getting this economy moving again. You know, his effort in the early days to create a bipartisan environment, which was admirable. Of course, nothing came of that because the Republicans set out to see that he didn't succeed. But, you know, once you get past that, he's into his second term now. There will be no third term because you can't run for a third term as President of the United States. If you really believe in this, the time to put the pedal to the metal is now. And I've done everything I can. You know, I've gone out, I got arrested, you know, 3 months into my term for protesting what was done with the budget then. I went down to we had a press conference in front of the Senate during the shutdown. I spoke to some of the senators, and admittedly, there are some folks on the Hill who are good friends of ours, and they're not all Democrats. You know, I cite, you know, Mary Landrieu, Democratic senator from Louisiana, but also, frankly, Darrell Issa, who is a Republican congressman from California, has really been a good friend to the District of Columbia. The things that we've asked him to do, he has stepped up and done those things. So, again, it's hard to explain why nothing has been done to promote democracy in this city other than we just simply aren't a priority. Listen, we have no senators to carry votes for us. We have a congresswoman who is very able. Unfortunately, she doesn't have a vote. In her 12th term, she doesn't have a vote. So what do we have to trade? And at the end of the day, you know, there were, back in 2011, when the budget was being debated then, we became a bargaining chip on the table. And that's what we are at this stage.
Let me ask you, we have a minute left in this segment. There was a recent hard-fought election across the river in Virginia. I would think that we'd say, thank God Terry McAuliffe won when it comes to the District of Columbia. What impact do you see that having on the D.C. government?
Well, first of all, let's remember that we've got a lot of people who work in the federal government who come in, you know, from Virginia every day. So I've talked to Governor-elect McAuliffe since the election has occurred. We're going to get together within the next couple of weeks to talk about how we move forward. But there are a couple of things that I can think of right offhand. First of all, the airport authority. We had a huge problem with Virginia. I went out on a limb and helped Virginia in that situation, Rock. They were going to have to pay $300 million more for a metro station that would have been underground. They made the case that the above ground, the aerial metro station would have been just as effective and cost them a lot less money. I talked to Governor McDonnell personally in that situation. I decided that I would try to help them. I talked to our members of the board of the Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority. They changed their votes to support that. What was the thanks that we got? The thanks that we got was they immediately tried to take over the board and create a composition that would have completely favored Virginia. So completely turned me off. I don't believe that that's the kind of relationship that we will have with Terry McAuliffe. I'll tell you one other thing too, Rock, that we can't forget, and that is, you look at the gun control laws in this nation. You know, go from state to state. We have some of the most stringent gun control laws in this city, in the nation. Yet we're always subject to whatever happens in other places. Remember, where that shooter from the Navy Yard killed 12 people, where did he buy that gun?
Yeah.
In Lorton, Virginia.
Yeah.
And frankly, I would like to work with the governor to see what we can do about the gun control law. Background checks, you know, what kind of weapons are sold. So I think there's a lot of territory for us to be able to work with Governor-elect McAuliffe, and I am optimistic about going forward.
You know, I'll close this segment. A long time ago, we heard taxation without representation is tyranny. I say in 2013, on November the 9th, it remains tyranny.
It is.
More with Mayor Vince Gray when we come back after these messages on The Rock Newman Show.
Good stuff.
And now, The Rock Newman Show.
Welcome back, folks. Today, November the 9th, 2013, we're in the Langston Hughes room of Busboys and Poets with Washington, D.C. Mayor Vince Gray. Mayor Gray, there was a month or so ago, a lot of news, a lot of headlines about the living wage issue in Washington, D.C. The D.C. City Council passed a resolution, sent it to your desk, calling for a living wage. It is a bill that you vetoed. You came under quite a bit of criticism for vetoing what was termed the living wage bill. The question being, why would the mayor of the Washington, D.C. veto the living wage bill? Why did you do so?
Well, first of all, Rock, I took the time. The council didn't transmit that bill for almost 2 months. They sat on it, I used the opportunity to talk to lots of people. I took a meeting with anybody that wanted one, whether you were for the bill, against the bill. I even had one group that came in and they had half the group was for the bill, the other half was not for the bill. Wanted to hear from people about this. At the end of the day, it just seemed like it was a job killer to me. There were 2 questions that I asked that I never got an answer to, and that is, fine, let's create, if we create this living wage bill, what prevents people who live in Maryland and Virginia and elsewhere from coming in and applying for these jobs and getting the jobs? Because anything we do, isn't that supposed to be for the benefit of the people who live in this city? There was no answer to that. My second question was, what prevents these firms who we're trying to attract into the District of Columbia to do business here, what prevents them from building operations right outside the perimeter of the District of Columbia in Maryland and Virginia, and then attracting the people from this city to come out and shop, which often happens now. People go further out, go out to various malls and shopping centers and whatnot. I got no answer to that one either. There was another provision in the bill that a lot of people didn't seem to recognize was there, and that was that there was a provision that said any firm that would qualify, and this was a very small set of firms, it was large corporations, with certain square footage, 75,000 square feet or more, basically retail operations. That's what they were, because it wouldn't have applied to any of the others. And one provision said if you have a union agreement, a collective bargaining agreement, you are exempt. Now, that exempted at least 2 major retailers in the city, one of which I know starts people at $9 an hour. So if we are really serious about this, why were we giving, I didn't give anything, why were people willing to give those kinds of dispensations to folks? I said in the course of this that if we really are serious about this, let's raise the minimum wage. And that's what we're working on now. There's a minimum wage bill before the council, and they got 4 or 5 council members who got various and sundry bills that presumably will be merged. We're working on our own.
Minimum wage is currently how much?
The minimum wage in the district is $8.25, which is $1 above the federal minimum. Our minimum wage always has to be $1 above the federal minimum.
And the new legislation is calling for what?
Well, it depends. There are various and sundry proposals on the table. Some have gone as high as $12.50 again. There are bills in the vicinity of $10 plus. San Francisco and Santa Fe, New Mexico have both raised their minimum wage, and they have come in around between $10 and $10.50 each. We've been paying close attention to San Francisco because some of their demographics, some of their challenges and whatnot are so similar to ours. The economy is very similar to ours. So we're paying attention to them, and what we've seen thus far is that there really are no untoward consequences for them having increased their minimum wage up to, let's say, $10.50 an hour. So I am fully supportive of increasing. I just don't think we need a rush to judgment. That's what happens when you get into a political environment, political season like we're in now. Everybody's trying to grab onto that thing that is going to push them across the line, as if the voters are going to vote for somebody because of, one bill or one statement or something to that effect. This needs to be thought through carefully because we're going to live with this for years. Maybe one approach is to say the minimum wage becomes X, but each year we raise it by a certain amount. Do you raise it by a certain dollar amount, or do you raise it by a certain percentage? Those are the things that need to be thought through. I'm one who, again, wants to see the minimum wage raised, but I want it done not in a reckless fashion, but in a thoughtful, constructive way so that we can feel good about what we did in the aftermath.
It seemed designed that in the event that you had not vetoed the bill, that the big box retailer, Walmart, would not have anchored some of the projects that they're talking about anchoring.
That is true.
Is that the case?
That is absolutely the case.
Okay, you vetoed the bill, now what?
Well, Walmart is moving forward. Walmart, since you brought that up, because people tagged it as a Walmart bill. It affected a lot more retailers than Walmart, although still a fairly small number of retailers when you look at the entire city. Walmart is about to open a store on 8th Street, right across from the government printing office. They're building a store on Georgia Avenue, just above Missouri Avenue. And they're starting to build a store over off of Riggs Road. The big issue for us, you know, were the other 3 Walmart stores, where we have food deserts. I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. You know, there are people who, you know, pontificate about the situation, but they don't live in some of these areas where we don't have, you know, and I do. I live in one of those areas. We have Skyland Shopping Center. Walmart was the only store that agreed to come in and anchor that, many others being asked. They made it very clear that they were not going to build those stores, and they were going to do everything they could to get out of the 3 stores that were already under construction. So the answer to your question is they have moved forward. You know how many applications for the job? We've been working with them on a job recruitment center. You know how many applications that they have gotten in 5 weeks since that process started?
I'd like to know.
20,000. Nobody wants those jobs, right? But 20,000 people have applied for the jobs. So, you know, people are imposing their own views, their own sentiments, their own political, you know, positions on folks who are actually making a statement to say, look, you know, we want a job. People who wants a job making $8.25 or $9 an hour? Well, a lot of people that don't have a job at this stage, and frankly, the residual impact, Rock, has been that there is still anxiety in the retail community at this stage about what does this suggest the District of Columbia is going to do in the future. Once you start that, it makes very nervous people who have to make those kind of decisions that stay with a jurisdiction for 5, 10, 15, or 20 years. Because once they put a store in, obviously they want that store to be successful.
Yeah. To say that you've had a challenging few months dealing with the federal shutdown, a number of other things, including the shooting at the Navy Yard. Mm-hmm. Can you please walk us through the call you got, and then how you managed that day, how you handled that day? You, by and large, got high marks, I think, across the media for your service during that time. Would you walk us through that tragic event?
Yeah, for the first call I got was, quote, we have an active shooter at the Navy Yard. And frankly, I didn't know exactly what that meant at that stage. So I then immediately headed over to the Navy Yard. And we really didn't have, you know, in the immediate aftermath, we didn't really have a grasp of exactly how serious this thing was. We knew that there was somebody in there who was shooting. Our first responders, even though that is a federal installation, our first responders were on the scene within 2 minutes. And then within 7 minutes, they had started to engage with the person who was inside. The first report we had was that there were 2 people who had been killed. Then they said 4 people, and then the number started to escalate until we got to 12. And it took us really, you know, it took us a couple of hours because nobody could go into the building 197, because of the fear of, you know, there being more than one shooter. People may not remember this, but it was reported that there were actually maybe 1 and 2 additional people who were with the person who did the shooting. That had to be addressed. There were even descriptions. There was one person described as being in a military uniform, well, and running from the scene. What that turned out to be was somebody in a military uniform who, the person standing next to him got shot, and he darted away, you know, to avert being shot himself. So, you know, the first task was to get in there to try to engage, as our first responders did. Our MPD and our FMES did a great job working with the Park Police to address this situation. To get in there and then bring, you know, to bring down the shooter who was involved in this. And then try to manage what was going on. I've never seen so many media in my life. There were literally hundreds, maybe thousands of media who were on the scene. And one of the things that we said we were going to do right away, Rock, was to make sure that people kept informed. Because if you don't let people know what's going on, they will fill it up with their own. They'll fill it up with their own information. So we had a press briefing virtually every 2 hours. And even when we didn't have a lot of new information, I said, our folks agreed, let's tell folks that we know 1 or 2 or 3 new things. If we don't know anything more, let people know that so that we're keeping them informed. And that's the way we tried to manage this. And it was a great team effort also, because we had the FBI working with us, we had the Park Police working with us, we had the military leadership at the Navy Yard, and of course we had our own first responders here in the city. not only were we on national TV, but we were on worldwide TV.
And I think that there was literally international applauding for the effort there. And that, of course, had to do in part, as you saw with the first responders, the Washington Metropolitan Police Department. Not so long ago, Chief Kathy Lanier sat in that seat, and we talked about a variety of things. One of the things was, and I wanted to ask you, as the black mayor of what was a predominantly black city, now still a large African American population, 48, 49%, but are 90+% of the drug arrests that happen in the city, when it has been determined that drug usage is equal amongst all demographics and all persuasions, black, white, Hispanic, and otherwise. Yet African Americans still get arrested. In the 90% of the drug-related arrests are African Americans. What are you, as the black mayor of Washington D.C., doing about that?
Well, first of all, I have indicated that I believe that we ought to decriminalize marijuana. That sending people to jail for possession of marijuana, I think that day is over with. Now, there are certain circumstances.
Is decriminalizing and legalizing the same thing?
No, absolutely not.
Well,
decriminalizing means that you don't go to jail, but you may get something like paramount. You have a civil situation. Maybe a ticket, for example, for possession of marijuana. Decriminalizing means that we could sit up here and smoke ourselves right now, and there would be no legal consequences at all associated with that. So they're two different things. But I'm supporting the decriminalization of marijuana. And one could look at this and say there's racial profiling, especially when you look at the statistics. So hopefully that will start to reduce the extent to which African Americans, are disproportionately caught in these situations. And frankly, it's not just D.C., it's other cities as well. And I hope that this will start to spur a systematic look at how we deal with these kinds of legal issues in this city and maybe across the nation. I participate actively in the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and it will be an opportunity, in one of those meetings to raise the question about how they are dealing with it and what we are doing with our own laws here in the city, hopefully being able to influence some of those others that may still be caught in the same problem.
I think arguably we consistently hear that perhaps the greatest challenge to the nation's capital is its educational system. There's an inordinate high dropout rate and a series of other maladies with the D.C. public school system. How is that going to be fixed? What are we doing to get it fixed?
We are really making extraordinary progress. We just announced with the Secretary of Education, who frankly could have been anywhere in the country on Thursday, because we announced the results of the National Assessment of Education Progress test scores. They're done everywhere in the nation. Every state, and by the way, they were kind enough to call us a state in this situation. There were 51 states where the testing was done, and what we are particularly proud of was the District of Columbia. We looked at 4th grade math and reading scores, 8th grade math and reading scores, which are a great microcosm for education progress. The District of Columbia was #1. In progress having been made among the 51 states that were measured. Nobody would have given us a chance a few years ago to be anywhere near an accomplishment of that nature. What I really appreciated was the Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, said there's irrefutable evidence of the progress being made in the District of Columbia. Irrefutable evidence. And he talked about how we are beginning to institutionalize change in the city, and that the kids are learning. One of the things that I'm especially proud of is what we've done with early childhood education. We have the most robust early childhood education program in America at this stage, and I say that factually, not just pulling out of the air. You go to a typical state, and you might find 30 to 40% of their 4-year-olds in school. We have 92% of our 4-year-olds in school now. In fact, those fourth graders who took those tests, that is the first cohort of pre-K, pre-kindergarten students to come through since we passed the legislation that I authored to create universal pre-kindergarten services in the city. Go across the river to go to Maryland and Virginia, some of these other states. Look at the 3-year-olds. They have anywhere from 10 to 15% of their 3-year-olds in school. We now have 70% of our 3-year-olds in school. To me, it's just axiomatic, and that is, you get these kids early enough, especially those who live in economically and socially challenged situations, you will have a chance to make a real difference in their lives. There is one factor that if you look at it, you will know where these kids are going to wind up in many instances. Look at these kids' vocabulary. A lot of our kids who are having difficulty in school, they start early because they don't have anywhere near the number of words in their vocabulary that kids who are achieving do. And you know by the 3rd grade, in many instances, whether these kids are going to have problems or not. We have the Early Success Initiative, which starts now working with kids at birth and moving forward through the 3rd grade. If you can win the battle between birth and 3rd grade, you will change outcomes for children, and that's what we're doing in the city. I was talking to the chancellor yesterday. She's getting calls from cities all over America now about what are we doing in the District of Columbia. And we really have an innovative approach, Rock. It's called Teach Kids.
Teach kids.
Yeah, right.
You got to reach them and then teach them.
Right.
There is a big question and an 800-pound gorilla sitting in the room. It is your critics say, some of your harshest critics say you've done a really good job in office, and that the time that you've been in office, your performance deserves another term. It was conventional wisdom that by yesterday, everyone who was going to be running for mayor were going to pick up ballots to go get signatures so that they could be submitted by January the 2nd or whenever that was. And it seems as if a multitude of people have done that, and you haven't done it. What's the dealio?
Well, I don't think it's a matter when you pick them up. I think it's a matter when you turn them in.
There you go.
So I don't worry about yesterday. I know what January 2nd is, and that would be the day after New Year's, right?
Most times.
I heard a story. Actually, Chairman Mendelson told me this story. We were talking about it the night before last. He said he remembers a candidate. It was Dave Clark, actually, because I didn't know this story. He said that after Dave Clark was the chairman, he had decided that he would run for the at-large position on the council. He said that Dave Clark picked up petitions 3 days before they were due, that he collected 4 or 5 times as many signatures as he needed. He turned in the petitions to qualify to be an at-large candidate, and then dropped out of the race. And I simply make the point that I don't think that it matters when you pick them up, as long as you get them in by the due date. The other thing is, people have asked me about running a campaign. I said, you're running a campaign every day in this office. Anybody that thinks that you can get out there, having been in this office, or even a council office, and you got a whole new platform, people will never let you get away with that. The campaign you have to run is, what have you done? And I say the following. I was very clear about what it is that I wanted to do when I ran for this office. And if you don't mind, I'll quickly, we talked about education, we talked about fiscal stability, we talked about getting people back to work, economic development, and public safety. Any one of these candidates out there, if they want to talk to me about those 5 areas, I will be happy to talk with them in infinite detail about what we have done in those areas. So to me, the people are going to say, all right, great, what is it that you said you were going to do in the first place, and what is it that you have done? I don't have any problem answering, and that's the question I answer every day. That is the campaign. So it isn't as if I have to mount some big campaign and put together campaign documents and all that. I'm involved in a campaign every day, and one should be in a job like this, because the question is, do you have the qualifications and the credentials based on 4 years of service, or now 2 years, 2 years, 10 months, 9 days of service in this job to be able to re-up? If you present your record to the people, what would the people say? And that's what people are going to base their vote on.
And when I come back, My question is going to be a very direct one to the mayor of Washington, D.C. Is he going to run for a second term? We may find out or not when we come back on The Rock Newman Show from Busboys and Poets.
And now, The Rock Newman Show.
Welcome back, folks. I sit with the Washington, D.C. Mayor, Vincent Gray. There's so much to get in. Before we get into that direct question that I talked about before we went to break, I'd like for you to, very clearly explain your position on what has been a hot button issue here in Washington, D.C., and that is the name of the football team that comes after Washington.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that, please.
Well, it is a hot button issue, and the focus has really intensified significantly. It's a question of whether the name of the team is offensive, and I think there are increasingly large numbers of people who are coming to the conclusion that it is offensive. I've had discussions with team representatives about it, and one of the answers I was given is that, well, there are 80 plus teams elsewhere in the nation that have the same name, which I don't think that's an answer, frankly. I think maybe there was a day when people found it to be okay. I think that day is over, and frankly, I think it could turn this into a real plus, and that is engage the people of this city in what they think the name ought to be. I go back to Abe Poland, who owned, of course, both the hockey team and the basketball team here. And our team used to be the Washington Bullets. Yeah. And he thought that may perhaps that would be a suggestion of somehow supporting or being insensitive to the violence that was taking place, especially during that era. And he stepped up and worked with the city to change the name. That's how we became the Washington Wizards, because it was the Bullets before that. I'm not even sure that people had complained, to be honest with you, about the name of the team. But here's a case where an owner saw the potential for an inflammatory reaction, an inflamed reaction to the name of the team, and changed it. This one is more serious to me. And frankly, I don't think it's going to go away. I think it's going to escalate. You got the NFL weighing in, in various ways at this stage. You had a couple of team members who weighed in and changed their position. But I think people recognize that, first of all, change is inevitable, and it's time for a change with this name.
And you obviously support that 100%.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. I mean, I'd like to be involved in the conversation about what it becomes. Yeah. There are people now who come into my office or, when I'm out and about, and they will suggest names. We got into a discussion about whether they should be the Red Tails or not, which, is a, has a relationship then to the Tuskegee Airmen, because that was the name of the movie. But I think people are already into the conversation, Rock, about what should the name be. And frankly, it would be such a constructive way to engage the people of this city around determining what the next name would be. The Houston Oilers, used to be, and they moved to Tennessee, I guess, and they engaged the people of that area of the nation in what the name of the team should be, and they became the Houston Texans as a new team. Tennessee, they didn't remain the Tennessee Oilers, because that wouldn't have made any sense, of course. They became the Tennessee Titans. And it was a very constructive, positive process to get the people involved in determining what that is. Took on a sense of ownership.
I know no better time or no better place. I don't.
Yeah.
For you to announce whether or not you're going to run for the next term.
Y'all see how he eased that one right in there?
I just can't figure out a better time or place.
I get that question probably now a half a dozen times a day. And Rock, as much as I love you, brother, it won't be today.
It won't be today? Okay. So we don't know when you're going to run. And there are a multitude of pundits out there that are saying that before you run, you owe the population of the District of Columbia a full and candid explanation of everything you knew about your campaign that has placed a cloud over it. Your response?
Well, I've addressed this, and how would people know they've gotten a full and candid? How would they ever know that? I mean, all I can do is, I said I did nothing. And that's where I've started. I've said that umpteen times. I will say it again. I did nothing. And
did nothing means that it's obviously documented. People have pled guilty.
Yeah.
You have friends and that have pled guilty about their role in what has been characterized as a shadow campaign. And your position is you knew of none of that.
That's what I've said. That's what I've said.
In any of that.
That is exactly what I've said.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Now, what's going to determine whether or not you run, and what's going to determine your timing?
Well, I mean, I think that the timing, in substantial part, is determined by January 2nd, when the petitions are to be handed in. So I think that's pretty clear. And one of the things that I've said too, Rock, is I don't want to spend the time. I want to talk about my record. I want to talk about the things that we've done. I don't want to spend several months talking about the 2010 campaign. That's over with. Do I wish the things that happened didn't? Of course, I wish they didn't happen. However, look at the record of this administration. What has been said about this administration in terms of how it's operated? Nothing has been said about any untoward incidents that have occurred. We have run a very transparent, open, honest administration that has accomplished many things. I don't hear anybody coming back saying, well, Joe Blow got a contract that she or he shouldn't have gotten, or these things have happened in these ways. You don't hear that. You don't hear conversation about anything illicit going on in this administration, anything of any untoward nature. And frankly, that's what I would like to talk about, and that is, how have we moved this city forward? I do not want to spend months talking about something that happened back in 2010. I wish it were over with. I'm surprised that it is still going on, to tell you the truth. It's not over with. I have nothing to do with that in terms of how this unfolds. But what I would hope is that the people would really want to talk about the future of this city, because I think that's what matters at this stage. Where is our city going? We are growing by 1,100 to 1,200 people a month. We have 632,000 people who live in this city. We have a population now that is larger than Vermont, a population that is larger than Wyoming. We are gaining on North Dakota. I want to talk about where we started this, and that is, when are we going to see that the people of the District of Columbia are treated like first-class citizens? When are we going to be able to control our own money and make the decisions about that? When are we going to be able to approve our own laws? When are we going to have a congresswoman who can vote, who can talk about the issues, and then almost symbolically is, well, Mrs. Norton, you can go sit down somewhere while we vote on this issue? That's the stuff the people of the District of Columbia ought to be talking about. And that's what I want to talk about in terms of how we move this city forward. So that's what's important to me. And that is if those things are important to the people of the city, then frankly, I want to have that conversation. People who want to talk about history, I can't change history. Nor can you, right?
No, well, maybe. Vince, you make the point of you run on your record. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, politicians have to find things to run on other than their record. So, again, I think your critics, for the most part, give you very high marks for your record. With that being said, the campaign of 2010 and all of the guilty pleas that have come out of it, it continues to be a cloud over the D.C. government. And let me ask you, what role is the U.S. attorney now playing in what will be an important election to come up, but not either coming forth and saying, look, we got something on you and we're going to indict you, or we don't and we're going to get rid of this thing?
I can't. There's no way I can comment on that. I think you'd have to ask, you'd have to ask the U.S. attorney and those who are involved with that question. There's no way I could possibly give you an answer to that. Again, what I've done is, in the time that I've been in office, I've tried to run this city in the fashion that we said we were going to run it. And frankly, I'm the beneficiary of working with some really wonderful people every day. These are people who have worked to move this city forward. To whatever extent there's a cloud, I think people, I don't think they come to work every day looking at the cloud. They come to work looking at the sunshine. And frankly, I think if you look at the results, they speak for themselves. Look at education. We just talked about that a few minutes ago. When we came in, we had a challenge with respect to our budget. We had a whole set of furloughs that had to be imposed upon people because our budget was, it was the only way it could be balanced at that stage. We righted that ship, and what we were able to do, frankly, was not only turn around the financial ship in the city, but we gave back $22 million of that furlough money to the people who were furloughed, because they were furloughed on holidays. There were 4 holidays. We gave them back $22 million. We have given raises to the people in the district government. Crime is down in the District of Columbia. Unemployment is down in the District of Columbia. Look at the economic development that's happening in this city, all over the place. I mean, there are 60-plus cranes working every day in this city. I heard somebody say the other day that, well, we have 60 cranes in the city, but they aren't doing anything. Can you imagine that? I mean, that's your best shot? I mean, these are developers. These cranes cost, I don't know, $20,000 to $40,000 a month to rent them. Why would anybody rent a crane and pay that kind of money and not use it? So, if that's the best shot, no wonder people want to keep talking about other stuff.
And here's what I'd like to juxtapose with the incredible boom, because there is a boom. This is boom town. Mm-hmm. Poverty, in a far too big way, continues to exist. Mm-hmm. How are you helping that?
Well, I think when you go back to education, I think ultimately education is the answer to that. And that is you equip people with a broader set, a deeper set of skills that make them more competitive. You talked about dropout rates earlier, and that is an issue. You talk about truancy rates. That is an issue. But the way you deal with that is, first of all, you make education relevant, to people. You help them understand why it is important for them to be involved in school and education. And again, not to be redundant, but get these kids at the earliest possible point. Rock, I have asked the question 1,000 times to people, why do we start children at age 5 in school? There's nobody has an answer to that. Yeah. I've had people tell me, well, we do it that way because we've always done it that way. Okay.
I remember something called slavery.
Yeah. You know what? Why don't you? 90% of brain development has already occurred by the time a child is 5 years of age. Why would we wait until they're 5 to start to maximize the stimulation of those children's brain? That's what we're doing with early childhood. And frankly, you know what you get along the way too? When you get a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, that 3-year-old or 4-year-old, there's no way that she or he can walk to school by themselves. Who's bringing them to school? That parent. In many cases, that very young parent. And we are now, we've started to develop programs that are engaging some of those parents who themselves may have learning issues, may have dropped out of school, may not have gone as far as they could. That's why the community college is so important in this city, to be able to get those folks back in programs. We just launched about 3 months ago a planning effort that will be implemented about 9 months from now. We are creating 9 career and technical education academies in our schools, in our charter schools and in our DC public schools, all of which are focused on what we used to call vocational education. We call it career and technical education now. A lot of people think Spingarn High School is closing down. It is not closing down. We are renovating Spingarn High School, and it will come back as a career and technical education program that will focus on healthcare fields. We've heard a lot about healthcare recently, haven't we?
We have.
And we'll focus on transportation. Our first streetcar line will open, it actually will be running by the end of December, and we will start passenger service about a month later. The terminus for that will be right at Spingarn High School, where there will be a streetcar barn, as we used to call them, car barns, that will be built. There will be a training center that will be there. We're going to train those young people in Spingarn High School for those occupations, which frankly they start $35,000, $40,000 a year. One other thing I'll mention too, Rock, and that is we are really working hard to open the doors in our own fire and emergency medical services to our young people in the city. We have had 2 classes of cadets, and I went to the kickoff of those. All of those kids that come out of DC public high schools and we're going into that academy. We have, 30 or 40 more that will be coming out before the end of the month, and we're bringing in a class now of 56, I think it is, to be the next group. Those are jobs, we only have 25% of the jobs in our fire and emergency medical services filled by people who live in the city. Only 19% of our police officers. Those are good jobs, which you talk about an antidote for poverty. Yeah. You talk about education being important in terms of addressing that. That's ultimately the answer. I don't want to be glib, but education is the answer, Rob.
Let me get this last piece in here. I heard you were a bid whist player.
I am.
And I heard you're a very good one.
I'm a pretty good hand dancer too.
I heard that also. Cut a rug.
Yeah.
I looked at Washington, D.C. and the political landscape, and there was a point where I thought that when it came to Vince Gray deciding whether or not he was going to run for office, you were holding a hand with all of the criticisms and all the cloud that we spoke of, that you might have had to say, I've got to take a pass. So,
I thought you were going to say I had the trump card.
That you would have had to take a pass. So, my question is, on whether or not you're going to run, what kind of hand you're holding?
Well, as long as I can see the hand and you can't, then I do have the trump card, don't I?
I was thinking you might say, I got a Boston sitting over here. Mayor Vince Gray of Washington, D.C., thank you so much for being on the Rock Newman Show and joining us today at Busboys and Poets and broadcast on WHUT. Thank you so much.